Okay, welcome back to the Are You Strong show. I have another extraordinary Rutgers University guest on the show tonight. And I'm not sure, I have to go back and count, but I think you're probably the 16th or 17th Rutgers athlete I've had on this show, which is really cool. But before I say the name, I want to rip off a couple of different things about this young man. And what I mean by young man, this guy's still a young man. You know, he currently a Rutgers assistant golf coach. Okay. Um, he was a 4-year member of the golf team, graduated in 2021, three-time Big Ten championship starter, two-time academic All Big Ten, which is really cool. You know, the academic side is really a big part of things. 2021 Ping All Region selection. 2020, I can't even pronounce the actual name of it. Is it Shrixon Cleveland All American Scholar, another academic, and then three-time preseason Big Ten player to watch. You know, a lot of really cool accolades here. But I want to welcome to the show Oliver Whatley.
Jeff, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the show, and hello everyone. Thank you for the introduction. A lot of honors there, but
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff.
very humbled by my experience playing for Rutgers for 4 years and now being a coach at the university. It means a lot to me to be on the show and to have this time to speak with you and tell my
Yeah, well,
story.
listen, it's my pleasure and honor to have you. You know, Oliver, I got a ton of questions to ask you tonight. And before I start ripping them out, why don't you just tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you ended up at Rutgers, and kind of where you're at today.
So I'm originally from Chevy Chase, Maryland. I grew up for a few years in Louisville, Kentucky, where I played a lot of my junior golf and spent the later years of my middle school and into high school in Maryland, and came to Rutgers because of course its location, and I got recruited heavily by Coach Judy, and it was an honor to be playing for a school like Rutgers in the Big Ten and the opportunities that I'd receive coming to the school. And nonetheless, had a lot of success at school and learned a lot, and just excited to be back as now coach. So
That's awesome. I was looking at the Rutgers website the other day, and I'm sorry, not the website, something online, looking your background up, doing a little homework on you, and I saw a video. I think it was from your freshman year they made of you. Do you remember that?
which one?
I
Because there's
forget.
a
They
couple really
interviewed
funny
you. It was
ones.
2018, so you had to be a freshman, probably, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And man, looking at you now, for those who can't see you because they're on listening from the audio, and your picture, your whole demeanor of when 2018 till now, like how much you've matured and grown. You look like such a young little boy on the camera in 2018. But how far you've come and developed now is truly amazing. You know, so I'm going to start hitting you with a bunch of questions. Because the whole world out there wants to know more about your story and who you are and everything. But my first question is, how did you know, golf was your sport? When in your life did you say, hey, was it 8 years old, 10 years old, 15? When you say, hey, golf is the way I'm going?
Yeah, it was actually a very emotional decision for me when I actually made the official switch to golf. I grew up in I'd say, pretty athletic family. My grandparents were from London, and I grew up playing soccer since I could remember, and played soccer pretty much my entire childhood, and had, this family golf outing that started by my grandfather. It was the day after Thanksgiving when um, half the family would go shopping and then the other half would go to the golf course and play golf, and I was, a small piece of this outing, driving the golf cart around, things like that. And that was my first introduction into golf.
How old
And
were you then?
gosh, I was maybe 5 or 6, maybe
Oh my
7.
God.
And, I was still playing very high level soccer up until I'd say it's seventh, eighth grade, and played on my middle school teams. And everyone, of course, was hoping that I'd play in high school, but the seasons between golf and soccer were the same, so I had to choose. And it was coming off a summer of, starting to play these like small junior events and just found a love and passion for the competitiveness of golf and told my mom, told my dad that, I'm kind of I was playing golf and soccer at the same time, but I was getting pulled to play golf and then of course pulled to keep playing soccer. So it was very challenging, but I came to the decision to continue my competitiveness within golf because of the longevity that you can play golf for. You can play it your whole life,
Yeah.
for business, building relationships, all the benefits that golf has to offer is kind of why I made the switch.
And how old were
Um,
you then? Was that seventh grade?
yeah, I'd say around like seventh, eighth grade. It was probably going into eighth grade where I was like, okay, like I need to stick to golf here, really focus on golf. Um, that's when the tournament started ramping up, kind of going into high school, because at that point it's now like, okay, like that's what I'm choosing to do going into college. So I had to start building that resume for golf, which, it that just kind of started all the challenges that I had to really overcome, starting golf a little bit later, getting into bigger events. I was a little bit behind the eight ball, I'd say, getting into bigger events, but it was kind of what was driving me to be really competitive in the sport.
Yeah. So how did you, when did you realize, because like you said, seventh, eighth grade, hey, I want to play golf, right? But when did you realize, hey, you know what? I can do this in college. Was that like right away, or did you figure this out maybe 10th, 11th, 12th grade? When did you figure that
No,
out?
it was right away. I was either gonna play soccer in college or golf. So I really had to choose going into high school, what I wanted to continually to pursue.
All right. So talk about you're from Chevy Chase, Maryland, Now,
Chevy Chase Field.
talk about the recruiting aspect, the process. You're in high school, you're down in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Schools are calling you. What was that process like? Because a lot of like the current high school kids today, they're, the whole world's, between today, how you got recruited in 2017, 18 to today is probably different, right? But talk about your experience, what it was like to be, chosen from high school to play at such a big level.
Yeah, it was now back on it, I wish I knew what I knew now. I was, 16, 17. I didn't really know the process too well. Growing up, like playing soccer, I always played a year up or 2 years up. So I either played a year up on my own team or 2 years up on my brother's team. So I was always around older people, whether it was in soccer or golf. In high school, of course, I was more uh attracted to like the older guys on the team because you can learn from the experience that older players have to offer. So in that sense, I was, Luke Schapp, who played a couple years at UVA. I consider him my mentor through these stages. He got recruited to UVA, so he was kind of helping me out through that process, telling me like what I needed to add on my resume, things like that. But really, I didn't truly know how it would work. I told myself that the good golf will take care of itself. So just kind of focus on playing good golf and you're gonna get the recognition. So that's kind of what I did. I practiced extremely hard. I don't think there was one day I wasn't at the golf course. And I got really creative with my practice and all the things that I needed to do to play well. And that kind of really started getting the wheels turning quite quickly. I'd say the biggest step in my recruiting process was qualifying for the U.S. Junior. That's kind of the stage where you get the most recognition. I remember the first like two holes, I was probably the most nervous I ever was on a golf course. I don't know what other players were playing in my group, but they were like 40, 45 college coaches like following our group, and I was just like, what is going on? Like
You're like a
I didn't know I
celebrity.
yeah, it was I did and I birdied the like second hole and then from there it was slightly downhill from there. But it was, the recruiting process is quite interesting. I always tell recruits now, like the good golf does really take care of itself. You play well, like you're going to get the exposure, you're going to get the recognition. A lot of that work is done by the coaches, finding players through rankings and things like that. So, at the time I didn't know the process too well. I knew I had to email coaches. I knew I had to, create a resume, but the timeline of all of that, it was quite stressful. I'd say that the hardest part was deciding on a school and
Okay.
those, I'd say, intricate, like unique conversations that you have between coaches, and trying not to burn bridges. But um,
How
it
did
was
you make
definitely a
that final
challenge.
decision? Was it just you alone sitting in your bedroom one day saying, "Hey, I'm going to go to Rutgers," or was your parents involved, friends? Well, how'd you make that decision?
My parents were always supportive no matter what I did. I'm understanding it more is like kind of where you go to schools. I'd say for the most part, kind of where you end up in life in a way, like where you want to move. It's just like the people you meet, like from that area. I didn't know it at the time, but I'm forever grateful that I came to a school like Rutgers in New Jersey. The energy, the atmosphere of, alumni, donors, everything that has to offer. Very, very grateful for that decision that I made. But yeah, it came down to, I'd say, those factors, location. I would I would be lying if it wasn't based on scholarship.
Okay,
I
nothing wrong with that.
that was a big decision. Like I've paid for school on my own, taking out student loans, things like that. So, scholarship and being financially stable was definitely a big step. So, it was kind of, who's gonna give me the most money,
Yeah.
in a way. So I'd say all of those things played a huge role in my decision.
All right. So what was it like, 18-year-old young man coming out of Chevy Chase, Maryland, stepping on campus, Rutgers, New Brunswick, right outside of Manhattan. What was that like?
I'd say there was at the time there was definitely I felt, well, maybe I put a lot more pressure on myself to make an impact. I was the class with Chris, Gatto up and Putt. So I'd say we were a pretty big recruiting class for Rutgers golf and kind of moving that needle forward. So I at the time, like I did the best with what I knew, but I knew I was coming to campus and I was like, I need to make an impact in a way. So I'd say at times it kind of hurt me in a way, putting too much pressure on myself, but also I knew what I was getting into coming to a school like Rutgers in the Big Ten, and it was it was right when Rutgers was kind of like new to the conference, so
Hmm.
all the sports teams at Rutgers were starting to perform at really high levels and getting better and better recruits. I think Geo Baker was my class too. So there's
Yeah.
just a lot of energy around campus
Yeah.
and the school, and just getting better and better recruits across all teams. So it was a cool time to be a part of Rutgers.
Yeah.
Getting into like basketball, making runs in the Big Tens
Yeah.
that year, and then every year after that, it just got tremendously better. So it was
Yeah. I think
just
I
being a part
think
of it. Yeah,
being a Rutgers fan and follower for so many years, there's a lot of ups and downs in different areas. But I think when you came in, like you said, you were in the transition to where all sports at Rutgers were excelling and becoming national competitors, you
yeah,
know? And that's really like a wow factor for Rutgers itself, and now you look at the facilities, all the money they're spending and the things that they're building and growing and the recruits they're getting. Now, like every team's expected now to be good. Whereas years ago, it's like, well, whatever, but
yeah.
now it's like everybody's expected to be competitive, which is exciting, and it's fun to watch. So let me ask you this. You know, I read off your accolades before, and a lot of that is also academic accolades. Can you talk to the listeners about what's it like to balance the demands of academics and I don't care what school you go to, just the academics in the school, but on top of a Big Ten athletic career that you got to deal with too.
Yeah, I know the audience can't see it, but I have a slight smirk on my face because the academic story is quite interesting. I really struggled at first academically, coming in, traveling to every single tournament. I'd say what the audience doesn't know too much about college golf is, we go to tournaments and you're gone for 4 or 5 days. I'd say 4 days, 3 days. You get in on like a Thursday, you're there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sometimes you're there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So you're away missing class a lot. Coming into school, I didn't understand, how difficult it was going to be. So, I'd say the first 3 semesters at school were really difficult for me. I had to really turn it around quickly, after pretty much my third semester. Like I had to turn it around. And from there, I got a lot more discipline with my organization, figuring out what systems work for me, just being super organized, getting ahead on assignments. I traveled to every single tournament I played in, other than 2 events. So being away, like you just have you I had to develop time management skills. I had to pretty much get all my schoolwork done before going to events. So I started getting on more online classes, getting all that work done as far ahead of as possible. And from there I really turned it around. It doesn't show, but there's a lot of work put into it. After those, first 3 semesters, I attribute a lot of my efforts to my tutors, Vicky Corzo, giving her a shout out to all the help she gave me, but just academic advisors. Kathleen Shank was amazing. Scott Walker, I think we had him later in my years, but I attribute all my success to the support staff at Rutgers getting me through it, helping me develop the skills that I needed to do well in school. I think after those first 3 semesters, I got like five or six dean's lists in a row,
Hmm.
finishing with like a 3.4 GPA. So it was definitely a lot of work, but I'd say all the skills that I developed through my time through kind of those difficult time periods. Getting called into specific meetings about academics was definitely not enjoyable, but it was kind of the wake up call that I needed to continue to perform at a high level, both academically and athletically.
Yes. I mean, hey, without the support, it's tough to excel, right?
Yeah, the support was extremely important.
So pressure. Golf is all about pressure. And I'm not a golfer, but I watch a lot of some on TV, right? I gave the sport up about 15 years ago because I was just so bad. I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm abusing everything. But how do you handle the pressure of golf? You're out there, you got a lot of things going on. It's just you and the club and the course. You can't count on anybody else. It's just all you. How do you handle that pressure out there on the course?
Oh, a lot of that comes from experience. Being, of course, in the present moment, not worrying about the outcomes and not worrying about the results, but the process. So you become a lot more process driven. What are the things that you can control? Well, you can control being in the moment, focusing on the shot at hand. Yeah, there's a lot. I'd say golf is like life. Like there's obstacles that come up that you can't even predict or plan for on that happen on a golf course. And you learn how to problem solve. You use your experience, being in those situations and past experiences, and learning from those moments, and kind of uh, applying them to that moment. So a lot of that comes from experience. In in my upbringing through the sport, I had to learn how to lose. I lost a lot. Whether it was, bogeying the last few holes in tournaments to get into playoff, and then losing in the playoff, or getting into playoffs and just I consider it like choking, or like things like that, where like you learn to lose before you can learn to win. And
Mm.
I did, I won the second event in my collegiate career as an individual, which was a huge moment in my career as a player. Going through all those previous experiences, getting in playoffs, losing, no, not finishing off tournaments in a way. So I had the opportunity early in my collegiate career to kind of put all that into the efforts of completing a collegiate event, and it's definitely one of my most proud moments of my college career is winning a collegiate event. There's so many pros out there that never won in college, and I was able to do it in my second event, which really propelled me, I'd say, in the sport at that time.
That's amazing. I love what you said. You have to learn to lose before you learn to win, right? Can, golf is it's like a lot of losing going on, right? Like it's only one guy wins the tournament. Everybody else, how many guys are in tournaments? 60, 70 guys, whatever, or more. And they all lose except for one guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Y-
losing. There's a
Yeah.
lot of losing in golf.
So can you talk about what that was like? You said your second tournament you won. How did you man? You were a young guy. How did you manage that winning? The expectation going forward. Like, are you expecting I'm going to keep winning like this, or hey, I know this is doesn't happen a lot. Enjoy the moment and keep trying to win another one.
Yeah, very mixed emotions on this now. At the time, I didn't know how big of a deal it was, to be honest. I know my teammate at the time alluded, he was like, like how often do you win? Like you don't win that often, like just enjoy it. So that always stuck with me. But at the time, like you don't like you're so young, immature, like you don't actually know how big of a deal it is in a way. So yeah, at the time I think I wish I enjoyed it a little bit more, because yeah, it's like how often are you put in those positions. So I'd say now, I told our team last year, I was like, there's part of me that wish I didn't win so early in school, because it adjusted, my perspective a little bit of the game, of the sport. I'd say I got a little bit complacent from there.
Mm,
Feeling like, you win that event and oh, like I've made it in a way. And, having almost that cutthroat mentality of, wanting more of it. And now we tell the guys um that it's we tell the guys now, it's like you got to practice like you've achieved nothing, but play like you've achieved everything.
right. That's
And
I
yeah,
like that.
that's a it's a big part of the sport where, like, yeah, you don't win a lot, but you have to appreciate the small victories day to day, and trying to get 1% better every day, and kind of building on your achievements every day is really important. But yeah, at the time I didn't really know how big of a deal it was in a way. It wasn't the toughest field in college, but nonetheless, like winning a event as a freshman was definitely a big deal. So I just at times I wish I didn't win so early in my
Early.
career, because you get the sense that, yeah, in a way, like you made it, and um there's a lot more to achieve from there, and I wish I knew that at the time.
All right. Well, I would imagine now as a coach, you're in, bringing your past experience to these young guys now. Say, look, you don't settle. You don't think like this is going to happen every day, and so you get to take your experience and now impact so many other guys' lives, and get them even more prepared than you ever were. You know, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, having all these experiences, of course, is really beneficial now being a coach, and um hopefully the guys can, take from my experiences, of course, and in a way be a lot better than I was, and hopefully achieve a lot more. And of course that's the goal. Like I wouldn't be doing my job if it wasn't. So
Yeah. So you've heard, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway because you kind of just talked about it, or maybe I'm wrong. You know, was winning that tournament your most memorable moment of your 4 year career, or did something else top it?
Um, Gosh, I want to say it was a big moment. From that point on, like I really like I say this now, I always wanted a team win. Like I would give up that individual win for a team win any day. So that was really from that point on, that's what I was striving for. And there was like that was definitely like the happiest, probably finish of my collegiate career. I know I had a good finish at Wake Forest. The following year I finished, I think, like 12th or 14th or something like that. But from there is I'd say seeing of course the success of other players within the program were definitely really cool moments too. I wouldn't attribute, all of that just to my own individual success. Because you come to school and you're a part of a team, so you want other players succeeding as well, but at the same time you're trying to beat them too. So it's a very difficult sport, I'd say, to be a college sport because of those reasons.
Yeah. So with that being said, now you have both sides of the spectrum now. You have the athlete, the playing, and now you have the coach's perspective. What advice can you give the younger up and coming high school athletes, you know, who aspire to play college golf?
I'd say of course the main thing is to stay coachable. There are
Mm,
times throughout my collegiate career where I wasn't the most coachable. I felt like I knew more than, maybe the people around me. And it's a very it's a slippery slope, I'd say, when you have that perspective at times. And I'd say, of course, going back, I would try to be a lot more open to feedback and kind of showing that vulnerability within being a player. And it's okay to make mistakes. Like you're in an environment where like making mistakes is okay. Um, and yeah, having that coachability aspect is extremely important when you're playing at a higher level. Yes, everyone is extremely good, but there's a lot of areas where you can get better. And if you're open to that feedback and that criticism at times, then that's when you really start getting better. Is when you acknowledge your weaknesses. You can now, once you identify your weaknesses, you can now work to improve them in a way. But if you hide from your weaknesses, it's just it's only a matter of time where it gets exposed in some way. And I'd say without by being coachable, you can of course get better year after year. And I'd say my teammate Chris at the time, he was that. Like he was exposing himself and improving, and now you can see his trajectory. Of course, now he was Big Ten Player of the Year, Haskins Award winner, like really he, performed at an extremely high level and it still is, and now he's on the PGA Tour. So like that's kind of, I'd say, the opposite the opposite of me is
yeah.
that person that is coachable, that wants to improve
Okay.
and isn't afraid to kind of expose himself in a way.
Now,
And
now
yeah.
I'll tell you what you just said takes a lot of guts. When did you have that wake up call? Hey, I need to be coachable. I need to be vulnerable. I need to listen more. When did that happen?
Definitely late, probably like later in school, maybe. I'd say definitely through COVID, because like our season got ended. We had a really good team my junior year. Like we're probably gonna make postseason. Chris was having a phenomenal year. I had a tough fall, but I pulled myself out of two events to go see my coach and get some like swing help. And then of course spring got pretty much canceled 'cause COVID. So that time out of school and reflecting on like, yeah, like there's like certain things you don't have control of and kind of appreciating that time, but also um I'd say that time away from the sport and trying to like really like improve in areas where you can't, get your hands on clubs and you're not playing on courses and things like that. but also I'd say even like post college where it's, almost seeing Chris's success, reflect on like kind of what he did differently. And that time out of school, I'd say was a huge part of my, I'd say, development in these
Yeah.
aspects. Just kind of reflecting on my experience as a player, what I could have done better, what I did well, of course, but what I could have done better. And now being a coach and seeing players almost make similar mistakes in ways where
Right.
it's like I made those mistakes, like this is why you shouldn't,
Yeah.
you
Don't
know,
be me.
yeah, like don't be mean. Yeah, exactly right though. Like don't be me. And that's where it gets that I think the job gets a little frustrating because it's like you're seeing players almost make the same mistakes, and it's like
Right.
you kind of
Now,
know
are
that
you
little bit of
noticing,
context. Yeah.
Oliver, are you noticing the younger guys today are more open to that, or are they even more hard-nosed, closed-minded than you were back then?
I'd say with how we communicate some of these things, they're becoming a lot more open, but I think
Okay.
you have to almost teach them to be open to it's okay to be vulnerable. Like I think people like with especially with social media where you're always trying to like put the best thing out there
Yeah.
and yeah, you don't want to be exposed, but honestly, at the highest level, it's going to be exposed. Over 54 holes of a tournament, if your speed control is bad on the greens, that's going to be exposed. If you can't hit a wedge shot tight, like that's going to be exposed. Like you can't really hide in a high level environment such as Big Ten professional sports. Like you can't hide. Like things are just going to be exposed over time. So it's okay to be vulnerable in practice, like making mistakes in practice, and then of course, try not to make them in tournaments. But
Yeah.
if you can play at a high level in practice and hit high level shots in practice and simulate practice as if it's a tournament, then your tournaments are going to be a lot easier.
It's funny you're saying, and I don't mean funny like I'm laughing, but it's fun. Like I sit there and I'll watch a golf tournament, and you watch these pros on TV, and they it looks like to me, man, that's a pretty easy shot. How do you screw that one up? You know, and they do because they're human, you
Yeah.
know. But it's like the sport you play, if you really think you have a long stick and you hit a little tiny ball, how many yards? you know, to the next to the five, par five is how far? It's like, and you got to get in this little hole 3 inches or 4 inches wide. It's crazy.
Yeah, I always think about that almost every day. It was like, who invented the sport? Like you're
Yeah,
hitting a ball. I mean, playing with Chris for 4 years, he's in it over 315, and it's like it's incredible.
yeah,
How far the ball can go and of course, how precise players can hit it too. It's pretty
it's
amazing.
nuts. It's nuts. They're all like freaks of nature.
Yeah.
So think about the sport for a second, Oliver. From where you're sitting, can you pinpoint an area where the competition itself brought out like the best in you and maybe the worst in you?
Well, definitely a sport where you're you're growing up playing it as an individual, right? You're playing individual events, playing for yourself, and then you come into a college environment where now you're on a team with 9, 10, 11 players, where you're on a team, your score counts to the team score, but you're also playing the tournament as an individual. So there's overlap of competitiveness where you're trying to beat your teammates, but you're also trying to help them, and you're also trying to learn from them. But at the same time, you're competing for roster spots. You're competing for being in the lineup. So it's extremely competitive. And then you get to tournaments, and again, like you're focused on yourself, but also this the goal of the team at the same time. So I'd say at times like the competitiveness of course wanting to beat Chris and of course knowing how good a player like Chris is, like, it was definitely very competitive and you want to win. And at times um I'd say at times it can be a lot. Like mentally, it just takes a toll on you of this competitiveness within golf, the longevity of it, being on a golf course for 12 hours, playing 36 holes at an event, and then going back and like now having to do maybe some schoolwork or things like that, like focus, like refocusing on an exam. So I'd say with golf, it's just it's a very competitive sport and very time consuming versus other sports where, other teams are traveling, playing a game, then coming home. Where like golf, you're going to a tournament, you're staying in a hotel, you're doing a practice round the next day, you have team meetings to review the course, and then the next day you go compete and you're on the golf course for 12 hours, and then the next day you're on the golf course again for the majority of the day, and then you come home. So all of that, it's just yeah, I think mentally, physically, like it can take a toll on you. So yeah, at times you kind of forget, you forget the joy at times from it all.
Mm.
Because there's so much going on with school, athletics, of course trying to enjoy the time as well, but there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of expectations. So I'd say at that point, like I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform at a high level, almost probably to like an unhealthy spot where it didn't really help me. It probably hurt me more than it helped me. But kind of taking a step back, and I tried, doing other things to work on these things throughout my time as well.
Man, everything you just said is it should be like wrapped up, boxed up, put a bow on it, and share it with the public because obviously I'm biased towards college athletes being I used to be one a long, long time ago. I understand the stress, the mental stress, the physical stress, the academic stress, everything you just said about everything your daily world and life is like. And the average person, Oliver, the average traditional student, people listening to this show, they don't understand. They just see you out there on the course. They see you walking across campus with your Rutgers golf hat on. They don't see everything you just mentioned, all that you just listed, all the stressful stuff you have to deal with. And then you have to realize that when you started it, you were 18 years old. You're not really a man yet. You're not a boy anymore. You're like in between, you know? And it's like, holy crap, how do you guys deal with all that stuff?
Yeah, and I think this is kind of why I chose the sport, because it's very similar to real life. And as you get older, of all the challenges that the challenges never stop coming, to be honest. Like that's what I'm learning, that's what I'm working through, I'd say, in my everyday life, is like this stuff just continues to happen, but it's building these skills to work through it, like having a support system to work through it, using past experience to help get through difficult times. So all these things of being a student athlete, like that's the advantage of being a student athlete, is you develop these skills, you make mistakes, you learn from them, and you strive to be better. But yeah, it's what the I'd say general public doesn't know is college golf is completely different than any other sport, where 12 hours on the golf course only counts as three in the log. So yeah, like 20 hours a week isn't really 20 hours a week. It's like it's at least 30, probably 35. Plus, if you want to be really good, it's way more than that. So you're looking at like 40 hours a week just on that sport. And then you also have school, um, work on top of that. So yeah, like, and these are all the things that you kind of tell as you kind of start working and getting interviews and things like that, where it's like, yeah, I didn't have time for an internship because
Yeah,
I was doing all of these things. And
that
what
is your internship.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
all these
yeah,
things like kind of go into the skills that you build throughout life. And yeah, 18 to 21 years old, there's a lot thrown at you and there's a lot of pressure, but having a good support system, you know trying to be stronger mentally, physically, all those things play a huge role,
yeah.
into being the best person player you can be.
So you kind of already described this answer, but I'm going to kind of throw the question out there again to give a little more detail around it. You know, h- how did balancing all of that, the college athletic life, prepare you for, life after the game? Like right now, the world you're in now. is different than what you were playing, but it's still stressful. But how did those 4 years of playing college golf, college athletics prepare you for today?
Oh, I'd say how did they not prepare me? I'd say yeah, I'd say all the struggles, like working through the struggles, working through the challenges, developing the skills and the mental capacity to work through these issues, relying on, the people around me, relying on coach to help me through difficult times, relying on, of course, all the support staff that you have at a big institution like Rutgers, where yeah, like these people are around you to help you get through it. That's what they're there for. So I use them. I used all the support that I could get because that's what it's there for. Um, and that's what really helped me get through it. And then of course from there you work with people, you learn from others, you start developing skills such as time management, organization, the discipline to say no to certain things that could be distractions. And yeah, it's all these things really played a huge role in developing these like really important skills that you need when you start working at a corporate job or whatever job you work out or do after school, whether you play professional sports like Xavier's, has to be a lot more disciplined than someone who works a 9 to 5 because everything that he does is based on his choice, his decision. Like he's his own CEO in a way,
Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, he has to say no, he has to keep his kind of eyes on his goals and things like that. And I'd say we all are using these skills in different ways based on what we need to do from our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you this because the listeners right now are saying, "What do you mean no? What do these young kids have to say no to? What kind of things are the college athletes, the disciplined ones, having to say no to?"
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is a social life in many ways. Like I said, you're spending, you know, 20 20 hours a week of like log time, but of course, you spend 12 hours on a golf course, it counts as three. So yeah, we're looking at, 30, let's say 30 hours a week plus school. You're looking at multiple hours going to class, things like that. So like, yeah, it's at a time where you see 30,000 other students enjoying these 4 years of school, and you're an athlete, 750 or so athletes at the school where like yeah, kind of you're almost like the face of the institution. Like there's a lot more eyes on you, there's a lot more
Yeah.
pressure on you to kind of perform at a high level. So yeah, saying no to like that those social events are a lot more
Hard. It's hard.
it is hard at times because at the same time, like you want to enjoy the time and kind of that's what these years are for in a way. And
Yeah.
yeah, like we of course enjoyed our time like when we can, but you have to really be disciplined and say no to many things and give up a lot for a greater good. So
Yeah. I mean, I look at this conversation comes up a lot, Oliver, on the show with other athletes, and you hear so many people talk about. They use the word sacrifice, you know, and I try to turn that around and say it's not really a sacrifice; it's an investment of your time in another place. Because you're investing that time to get a better return down the road for something versus a sacrifice. It just doesn't sound it sounds a lot better than saying sacrifice. But that's how you have to look at it. Is hey, listen, I'm going to invest my time over here instead of this party. I'm going to invest my time over here instead of at this off-campus whatever. You know what I
yeah.
mean? But that's hard for an 18, 19, 20-year-old young man to do.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think for younger people out there that in the audience, I'd say a big skill is having willpower.
Hmm.
I'm sure you know what willpower is, but it's of course the ability to control impulses, delay gratifications, and stay committed to long-term goals, even in the face of challenges and temptations. So, being able to say no because it doesn't align with your long-term goal, and things like that. And I, of course, at times wish I had more willpower, but it's something I'm really working hard on now is, staying focused on goals. And within golf especially, like a lot of the gratification comes like later. Like you go out and practice for 6 hours, like that doesn't just start to make you better. I don't think there's many sports where there's instant gratification for practice. Like it usually comes um over a longer period of time. So it's not being caught up in um instant reward.
Right.
It kind of comes over time. And I think that's harder for, I'd say, like younger generations now to kind of understand, is that you open up your phone and you get that hit of
Yeah.
dopamine because someone liked your photo. So I think it's harder now to understand that, but a lot of this comes with time.
Yeah, you got to be patient,
Yeah,
you know? I would say be patient with the results, but be in a rush to focus on the process, you know?
exactly.
So you mentioned a couple of times support. Can you talk about, what kind of support you had that Rutgers as the athletic world provided for you as a student athlete to help you transition through your 4 years?
Well, the main thing was understanding um to a point where pretty much administration needs to step in and be like, this is almost pretty much not acceptable, in a way. I was, of course, traveling. I was making an impact within the team, but at the same time, I wasn't holding my weight academically. And that was when, as an institution, it's like, okay, like, we need to step in and kind of, put our arm around this person, like help them out and like see how we can kind of get things better academically. And
Yep.
that's kind of what I got. I'd say
Now,
after
did you ask for that help or did they just step in automatically?
they pretty much stepped in automatically, which, I'm appreciative because it was
Yeah.
it was more like that. It was a good wake up call. Like it wasn't like I wasn't close to not being eligible or anything. It was just not to the standards of what our team was at the time with GPAs and things like that. There's still a lot more room, but it was a good moment for me knowing that okay, like these people care about me, and I'm not gonna let them down. Like I'm gonna get my stuff together and I'm gonna work hard and like turn this around, and that's what I did. But I used the tutors. I Of course, it was simple things of just getting my assignments like planned out for the week. I worked with, other support staff to help like pretty much write all these things down on a weekly basis. And that kind of started, getting me thinking about, okay, like this works for me, getting everything in a Google Calendar, just being a lot more organized was like a big skill. And then also just as I was traveling to events, getting all the work I needed to get done before those events. So that of course I could go to the event, be focused on being present, focusing on the tournament and not worrying about school. I know there were a couple of there was one tournament in particular that I remember that to this day, I regret this, but I had a big exam like right when we got back, and I was almost pretty much studying. I was studying like pretty much at the event, and it was just like it was way too much to be like doing like mentally, like trying to compete at a really high level, but also
Yeah.
you know, trying to like study for an exam. So like yeah, like you learn these things being a young, like immature like person, but they're all skills that, go hand in hand with developing and becoming more mature and learning what the right ways to do things are. But yeah, I talking about the sport because tutors were extremely helpful. Just working with professors more.
Yeah.
Of course, professors are very understanding what student athletes are going through and the weight that they pull for the school. So, just working with them, being honest, being transparent, um being okay with, asking for help is a big thing as well.
Well, how about on the mental side, Oliver? Academics, everybody lines up. Here's how you do, here's what you got to do. You got to get these grades. But sometimes it just becomes overwhelming for a college athlete to balance all that. And you mentally, let's say you lose control, but you said before you got to stay focused. I love when you said that. but sometimes the athletes just lose their mental focus. What kind of support was there for you if that ever happened? And if so, now as a coach, can you identify when you see a young athlete who's struggling mentally? Can you see that now, being that you're older, mature, you've been there, and you're a coach, and you can see what's going on in the world?
Yeah, well, I think we work a lot. I'd say high level athletes work a lot more with sports psychologists, which at the time I wish I worked with one a little bit more. I know I made phone calls with someone who I worked with before, Chris Cheddar. She actually was, she had a really good relationship with Ben Hogan actually and wrote a book on him, but she got into sports psychology. So I worked with her a little bit, just like some phone calls and some of the struggles I was going through with swinging and swing confidence and yeah, the ability to perform at a high level. I'd say a big thing was, meditation. It's something I've been doing for years now. And yeah, it just brings a lot more clarity to the mind and just uh, being a lot more present with kind of the stuff that you're doing and working on. So I'd say everyone's a little bit different when it comes to these things of like what works for them. Part of it is just like trying new things and seeing kind of what sticks and what doesn't, and kind of just learning from other people and like collaborating with other people. Like what works for you might, you know, it might click something in your brain where it's like, oh, like I like that, but I'm gonna like kind of change it and make it a little bit better so it works for me. So all these different things kind of play a different role um in it all.
It's got to be tough, at that level, competition, academics, and traveling. Like you said, you're like it seems like you're on the road all the time,
Yeah.
right?
Traveling a lot. Yeah, there's, mental fatigue, physical fatigue. I think that's why that you that's as an athlete in a big school, like that's why you have so much support. You have trainers to help you recover. But you have to use them. Like these things don't just happen. Like you don't just get better just by, you know, showing up.
Right.
You get better by actually putting in the work. What you put into it is what you'll get out of it. And that goes, I think, for anything that you do. Like if you really want it, like, you can achieve it if you're putting in that work. And if you're utilizing the people around you that are there for you, and that's what I tell players all the time. It's like they're there to help you, like they're getting paid to be your support. So you like use them, put in the work and use them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Be resourceful with the resources,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right. So, looking at your athletic career, right? How do you think college sports, especially your athletic career, the experience you had, how do you think that's going to propel you in your professional life now?
Um, well, I'd say the relationships that I've been able to develop with coaches, teammates, professors. I still utilize a lot of those resources. Professor Beal, I still talk to on a regular basis. So I'd say managing all these relationships has really helped me kind of navigate into the professional space a lot. Still utilizing alumni resources like Kerry Lock and Scarlet Knights for Life, like all these resources that you really have, like kind of for the rest of your life being an alumni at the school. I'd say all play a huge role in navigating that professional life. I'd say I there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think about my college experience, of the lessons that I learned, the mistakes that I made, of course the things that I do well, but I think mentally, like your brain kind of attaches to those negatives a little bit more at times. So yeah, I think about the mistakes that I made, and like how to improve moving forward. Um, so all these things that I learned through like my academic struggles, the first 3 semesters, all these things play a huge role in navigating that professional life a little bit more.
Good. So looking back, is there anything you would have changed, over your 4 years? Anything you would have done differently?
The simple thing is being more coachable, of course, being more open to that feedback, that criticism. I definitely was putting in a lot of work on the side and outside of like the team environment. And I was putting a lot of work on school. I think that definitely took a lot of my time, kind of playing almost catch up in a way. And I was still putting in the work, but I'd say just being a little bit more open and appreciative of the time that you have with your teammates. At times I'd go maybe see other people versus spending more time with the team because you're traveling with the team like every single tournament, like you're just with them all the time. So at times when you don't have to be with your teammates, like it's almost nice like not being with them and like kind of taking time for yourself and things like that. Um, so I'd say, of course, appreciating the time that you have with teammates. Of course, I like my college career got cut short a little bit because of COVID. So yeah, there's certain aspects where you just wish you kind of enjoyed that time a little bit more
Yeah,
because
enjoy the moment, right?
you don't really have control of what happens from there.
So what advice can you give now? You already gave advice to the high school kid coming into college, right? What advice can you give to the college senior? They swung their last club for their college athletic career. Now it's time to transition into the real world. What advice can you give them about that transition?
Good luck. Uh, good luck. Now, yeah, it's a different it's a competitive world out there, but it's no different than collegiate sports. All these skills that you've learned through college are going to be really important as you get interviews and things like that. And it all comes down to communication. How can you kind of communicate your story in a way that's intriguing to an employer and that shows your work ethic and all these things where it's like, yeah, you might not have the resume of I'd say regular students who have all these internships and all this I'd say career experience, where I'd say most athletes within golf don't have internships, at least the ones that are playing in most events, because there's not as much time. Like you're playing fall and spring and you're playing throughout the entire summer. It's not like other sports where you have all these, like you have winter off, you have spring off, and you have summer off, where it's, you're playing year round. So with all these, like you're developing that discipline of being able to say no. All these skills play a huge role into whatever occupation like you're gonna get into. Um, it's utilizing all those experiences to develop those skills that you will eventually need. And that's kind of what in a way, that's how I coach now is you're going to eventually need to learn how to be disciplined, to say no. You're going to eventually need to like respond to emails. You're eventually gonna need to know um how to prioritize like certain tasks and things. So like why not try and do it now versus waiting and delaying like what you're gonna need to know eventually. And those are things that I wish I knew at the time too, because yeah, it took me a little bit maybe longer than others to like figure these things out too.
Yeah.
But you eventually going to need to know these skills to do anything successful in life. And I'd say at coming from an institution like Rutgers, where like you're going to be in high pressure situations, like most people that come from Rutgers are going to be getting like really good jobs, and there's going to be pressure in whatever any like alumni would face coming
Yeah.
from a school like Rutgers.
I'll tell you, man, that school is lucky to have you as a coach because you're taking your real world life experience from actually living there and playing there and sharing it with the kids that are on the team now. Like, how much better can that be? That's awesome.
Yeah, and I know I'm not scared of sharing even the things that I didn't do well. I think it's important. I think others can learn from it. I think it's important learning from mistakes, and of course, if you don't repeat mistakes, it's better. But I'd say yeah, like there's a lot of things that I did really well. I was extremely disciplined, even at a very young age, where I had to say no to a lot, like even through high school and even before high school. I was a kind of player that I would drag my dad to take me to the golf course. I'd get to the golf course at 5 a.m. before the 2 hours before the sun even came up. I'd pull out the golf carts and then I'd sleep in a golf cart. And then wait for the person to come open the shop. So I was doing this at 13, 14 years old, where it was my life. And I'd come to the golf course before sunrise and I'd leave after the sunset. And I did that every single day throughout the summer. And yeah, I think all those years doing that, and then of course you want to succeed and you want to contribute to, a greater good. You want to contribute to the success of an institution, a school like Rutgers, where there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of really good athletes doing a lot. And there's this pressure that just it does take a toll, and you start kind of, I'd say, maybe developing or getting into not great habits of, kind of pushing and not really getting much out of it. And and then I think challenges from there kind of occur, and it's working through them, it's developing the skills to kind of take a step back and kind of stay in that present moment.
Yeah. Well, Oliver, man, this is great advice, great story, and I've asked you a ton of stuff today. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that you think we should chat about before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think there's much more. It's of course very appreciative of this opportunity to share just my story. So, appreciate the opportunity.
Well, listen, man, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I know the listeners are going to appreciate it. And I know your team's going to appreciate it because hopefully they'll hop on and listen and they get to hear your story from your heart, and hear your experiences and where an 18-year-old freshman from Chevy Chase, Maryland, to now as one of the coaches on the team helping impact the school at such a big level. Man, they don't understand what they have, which is really cool to have you.
Yeah, and it's just kind of why I wanted to come back and kind of give back. Having 2 years away from the sport, working in a corporate job and being able to reflect on this experience and everything that we talked about today. A lot of them have already heard it because I'm open to sharing, vulnerabilities and the things that I could have done better and of course did well. But it's nice to have those experiences and to share them with other people.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you being on the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing Rutgers golf team kick some butt this year.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.